Hello and good morning.
Good morning.
I want to do something radical. I want to start on time. Hi, my name's Zachary Rynew. One of the biggest issues we've had, I think, in the cycling mobility community is how we communicate. I think a lot of our issues are aligned with other people. Traffic, yes, we want to do something about it. Climate change, yes, we want to do something about it. Cars, it's a touchy point for a lot of people. And, the landscape has changed a lot in the last few years, especially with social media becoming such a stronger force in how we relate to people, how people get their messaging, how people react. Today there's obviously no right answer to how to do this, but I think the main message is that we have to ask a lot of questions. The landscape's always changing. The goalposts are moving all the time, especially in this world right now. What we're going to talk about today are two specific cases here in Los Angeles. A little background was, in 2015, the city passed the 2035 mobility plan. And then in 2016, we passed the sales tax Measure M, which was going to bring more active transportation, help enhance all of our transit lines, and add more. And then 2017 happened. There was a Great Streets project in Mar Vista, and that had become really big news, not just in the area. It was just a 1 mile project, but really became a big lightning rod. So before we get into this, my name is Zachary Rynew. You can find me at CiclaValley. This is Sarah Auerswald. Sorry. She served on the Mar Vista Chamber of Commerce and Community Council. This is Dana Variano, who's also served as Communications Director at CiclaValley, LACBC. She's at her third day at her new job today at Raleigh, so thanks for making it out. This is Peter Flax. He's been editor features of Bicycling Magazine. You'll see him a big contributor all over in terms of mobility issues. Alissa Walker, Curb National Urbanism editor and also Streets blog winner. Matt Tinoco, who's housing and homeless reporter for KPCC. How many C's is that? KPCC. And Edin Barrientos, who Chief Lunes, we'll be talking about the Justice for Wound later. So first, Sarah, please give us some background to all people that may not be familiar with the timeline of what happened with Mar Vista.
Hi, so in 2015, there was a challenge grant issued by the Great Streets team at LA City Hall, and our Chamber of Commerce won one of those grants, and what we did with it, along with a broad coalition of the Community Council, the Councilman's Office, preschools, nonprofits locally, we put up a pop-up version of what currently exists on the street, and so that people could see it and that people could interact with it. And we did it, because we're a Chamber of Commerce, we did it on Small Business Saturday to encourage people to walk and shop and dine, and it was really successful. It was well attended. The head of the Small Business Administration flew in and shopped and dined and played, went bowling with her family. It was great. A lot of local businesses had the best day they've had in 10 years. It was phenomenal. Now, it was really well communicated at the time. We made, I think, every effort we possibly could. I personally went into every one of the 120 businesses on the street. There's a 1 mile stretch. And we sent out an EDDM postcard. We did social media, we did banners, billboards, we did everything that we could with the budget that we had to get the word out. And yet, there were still people, of course, who did not know about it because that's kind of life. And so, first thing about communication, I think everybody has to know that sometimes, no matter what you do, the word doesn't get out. But you still have to try everything you can. So then, what happened between that day in November of 2015 and when it was implemented was a lot of things, and a lot of bad timing, but a lot of just hard things. First of all, it was a state highway controlled by Caltrans at the time. It is no longer, but that process of relinquishing and turning it into the cities was really slow, and it delayed what happened. So anytime that you can engineer your project to make sure it happens quickly will benefit you. Not without outreach, but still quickly once outreach has been done. So that was a problem. There then was another configuration change that happened in between our pop-up and the implementation in Playa del Rey, and that was done very differently. And it had a really negative effect, and people were very angry about it. And what happened was the two projects got conflated. And so Mar Vista was, the Great Strand of Venice Boulevard was sort of painted with the same brush, and both were seen as bad in exactly the same ways, and they were treated that way. And the messaging from the people who were not happy with it was all you heard. And it was really hard. Everybody was reactive in the positive messaging, and that didn't serve the project overall, in my opinion. So one of the things is that if you're lucky enough to just get your messaging out there first and be positive about it and see what changes, there are businesses that thrived because of the changes. There are businesses, I can tell you, I've lived there since 1996. There are businesses that have closed since then, before anything happened on the street. And there are businesses that are still open today they were open before 96 and they're still open. So, things change in small business land all the time. But we know that when we did our pop-up, we collected data, and we had people who said, I've lived here for 20 years, I never knew that business was there. But I got out of my car and I walked the mile, and I saw them and I interacted, and now I'm going to shop there, or now I'm going to dine there, whatever it is, go to yoga. The other thing that happened is the Art Walk, Mar Vista Art Walk, which is now a quarterly event, came out of our pop-up day. And so, it's about finding and communicating the messages that are positive and great about what the changes can mean. And I know I'm talking a lot. I wanted to say the one thing I for sure want everyone to know about is the LA Economic Development Corporation does a forecast every year for the county, the health of the economy of the county of LA. One of the things they've said is that our economy is based on millennials staying here and keeping these amazing jobs, right? Part of what goes into that is making a livable city, a walkable city, a very, a city they want to stay in, because all of us need them to stay here. Our economy depends on it. So one of the messages that can get out there, it's hard, it's not an easy one, but I am not a millennial, but I benefit from them being here and happy. Kind of give them whatever they need, and then Gen Z after that. But anyway, so that's, I don't know if I answered your question.
Something happened, yes.
Something happened, a lot of things happened.
Peter, you were involved in this controversy early on and probably still are. How do you describe the scope of how big this became on the social media front, and for the scale of what the story should have been, how it grew to be what it was?
Okay, it kind of grew into a mini disaster. I think I live on the west side, I live in Manhattan Beach and ride every day sort of through Playa del Rey, and I think the two projects happening simultaneously just played out in a way that blew up in multiple communities and on social media. And I'm sure it happens in other places in a city like LA or San Francisco, but a lot of the people that were at the center of the opposition were formidable. That in the case of the forces against these two projects, it was an aerospace engineer. There was someone who was an executive with a social media company. There was one billionaire. There was just a lot of forces that know what they're doing, and they got together very early. And I remember just like a week after the road diet in Playa came out, and it was like living in Manhattan Beach. It was just obvious that it was like a shitstorm, and that they were getting professionals to make Facebook videos, and it's just like what I learned from the last couple of years is that like the same dynamics that that Trump and Bannon and Zuckerberg have created, where people can go on social media and take a narrative that might not be factually accurate and push it out to a huge audience. That same sort of dynamic is happening with these kinds of projects. And so I write a lot of like journalistic stories, but a lot of what happens on social media is just like this arm wrestling of like people on Facebook and Twitter who might not know a lot about an issue and are trying to understand what's going on. That like a battle for like what the truth is about these projects can sort of ignite and take place on social media. And it's still going on. That I mean, in the case of these two projects, it spawned this organization that's now called Keep LA Moving, which is national, and that the founders are engaged with groups all over the country. And I follow these projects on the news stories, and that it's like the same talking points are playing out everywhere in the country now, where there's like a playbook of how to respond to these projects, and just like you can like see in a daily newspaper from some small town in Louisiana or wherever, that like the same dialogue is happening everywhere.
Alissa, I saw you grinding your teeth down.
Not at you.
Well, you live on the other side of the city from Mar Vista. But at about the same time, we had other projects that seemed were ready to roll out but disappeared. Can you describe the effect that this had on Los Angeles?
Well, I'll give you the other example on my side of town, the Rowena Road Diet. At the same time, some of these same people, using the same talking points, and you reported on this too, would come to the meetings and say similar things about the businesses, the threat to the businesses. And the Rowena Road Diet, which was put in place because a woman was killed crossing the street going from a business from one side to another, they didn't obviously have any big changes. It was just paint. They just put bike lanes and took a lane of traffic away. And every single study that had been done, several independent studies, had proven that it was a safer street, that crashes were down, that fatal crashes had been eliminated, basically. And the businesses were all very happy, including there's several schools on that same stretch, which, the parents walking their kids to school were also very happy. But, again, several people who can appear larger than they are due to social media and resources that can make professional videos. A lot of people who work in the professional video world made a big stink about it, and the council member, David Rue, actually did a study, spent $80,000 to study the effectiveness of the road diet with the intentions. Almost everybody agreed. They thought the intentions were to get rid of it, to prove that it had bad effects it was affecting the neighborhood poorly. And they paid the money, which could have paid for like a really nice street light, or a safe crossing for the street, or maybe some protection for people using it. They did the study, and they found out that more people were biking, more people were walking, businesses were fine, it was safer. And now he's come around and said that he wants to add more improvements to make it even safer for people using it. So whatever the outcome was, yeah, whatever the bad, the lessons we might have learned from, I say we, I'm not supposed to say that, the people, stakeholders, it really did, I think, make a good outcome in what happened there. And I will also mention, just because it's right by my house, I live by Virgil, a very successful road diet that no one has complained about, and we've been begging for more improvements and have not gotten them. So where's the other side of the equation, where there's tons of neighborhoods out there that don't get the headlines, that are begging for safety improvements on their streets, and nobody seems to be listening or paying attention. I'm giving it to you.
Well, my next question is for Dana. Being in the advocacy world, do bike and active transportation advocates have the tools to handle these types of crises?
Yeah, we do have the tools, which, tools to me are the know-how, which is like how organizing 101, action-based campaigns, like the only thing that I see as a solution to this, like Cambridge Analytica problem is like getting all of these amazing people in a room to stand up together and their voices heard, right? So that's an advocate's job. The piece that's missing is the funding for that. We know how to engage, educate, elevate, right? Those were the three things that we could have tried to do around to like combat the Keep LA Moving folks. But when it comes down to it, nonprofits or CBOs are often focused on the work that's funded. And Mar Vista became a huge and constant crisis communication piece that was not a funded piece of our work. And so it's like, where do you draw the line with having a small team of 8 drop everything that they're doing to focus on this when you have obligations to other funders and projects? So, I mean, we need funders, because to me, Mar Vista is really about changing hearts and minds, which is some of the hardest advocacy work, and working against this misinformation that's being spread, and that's really hard to find funding for. And so I think we need public agencies and funders to step up and recognize that if advocates are supposed to play this role, we need the funds so that it can be led from people who come in.
If I may, so one of the things that is funded already is CiclaValley, right? And it's a fantastic way to communicate all the great things about being in the street and being safe, and sort of more and smaller and more fundable kind of ways to do that, I think would help personally.
Next question I have is for Matt. A related topic is also housing. Transportation is tied to housing back and forth. We were even talking about the trains earlier, what role they played in terms of trains in LA. We had the largest private transportation system. It wasn't profitable, the trains themselves, but they made a profit because they developed. How do you see housing issues, a lot of the parallels you see within active transportation, how it's being covered, what are the hot points that come up?
One of the things, so for context, I cover housing and homelessness right now for Southern California Public Radio. I started that about 1.5 years ago. Before that, I was largely covering transportation as a freelance reporter. And I've covered everything going on here, as well as many other things in Southern California. I think one of the most important things with regards to communicating things like this, I mean, homelessness is I cover mostly homelessness now, and the flashpoint over the West Side road diets, road street improvements, whatever we see, is very, very similar to the sort of reactionary, you cannot put this shelter here, you cannot put this permanent supportive housing here. It's born out of the I like it the way it is, I don't want it to change at all. Now, I think everybody is At the same time, everybody acknowledges that things need to change, right? So in Southern California, the biggest issues we have are the fact that there are people decaying in our public right-of-way, and the fact that the traffic just continues getting worse, and it's just gridlocking itself. I think when it comes to communicating to the wider audience, what is important is, one of the hard things I think with media is that things can very, very quickly, the narrative can get set, whoever sets the narrative immediately dominates it going forward. So in the case of the Mar Vista Road diets, and as well as Playa, or the Venice road reduction, as well as the Playa del Rey, everything, it immediately became a narrative set by, in this case, the people who were opposing it. They were immediately able to get onto a local radio network, KFI AM 640, which has is the largest talk radio audience in Southern California. And then they're able to blast that out to an enormous number of people who are immediately then able to come and voice their public opinion, even if they aren't necessarily living in that local area. Same thing happens with homelessness stuff. But the problem with that is that because the advocates, people who are in favor of these projects for very solid reasons, we're playing defense the entire time. We're saying, okay, well, no, this isn't even about bike lanes. This is about traffic deaths. We're doing these improvements in the case of Playa del Rey. Like, there was that misinformation then made it into mainstream media. It made it onto our local networks simply just because it just wasn't countered immediately in the very first couple. You have to get ahead of it, and you have to be prepared to do it immediately, so that way the moment that you see this stuff sort of playing out in local media, you can get to you need to be able to access the reporters and the people who are actually going out and making that content, and then, hey, do you understand actually what's going on here? Because there were things published in our local paper of record that were just not accurate with regards to, oh, well, we're doing this for bicycle safety on Vista Del Mar, which no, that was not the reason. There were not bike lanes in that project, despite the fact that countless local television stations, as well as local print media, said that on record. It was a road traffic safety project that was intended to prevent loss of life, because in that stretch of road, there were so many people who had been struck and killed by vehicles crossing it because it was just poorly designed, and by the way they had set it up, people were running across what was a very high-speed thoroughfare. That was not the discussion at all. Instead, it was a discussion set immediately by that reactionary, well, we just don't want this here because, well, nobody bikes in Los Angeles anyway, which is not true. The reality is that the number of people who are dying on our streets continues to increase, and it's because we have so many more people who are basically, as far as I can tell, just on their phones in their car. The way you get that is you either figure out how to have people not on their phones in their car, or you do street engineering. And communicating that the engineering, and that this is not about like, oh, we're trying to promote a livable lifestyle, but it is literally because you're most likely to die in a traffic crash, or, I mean, it depends on your demographic, but for children in the LA County, the leading cause, I don't remember it exactly, I'm sure Alissa knows it off the top of her head, but the leading cause of death for, I think it's like 5 to 14. 5 to 14 in Los Angeles County is a motor vehicle crash, and that's either somebody in the United States.
Yeah.
And
in the United States, it's the entire time that you're a child, which is, I mean, the time under 18. So yeah, it's like it's your whole childhood. You're most likely to be killed. And then the second one is guns, and then of course you're talking about demographic. But like, what world have we built for our children? Like, a kid was killed this morning in Koreatown crosswalk by SUV. Like, why? Sorry.
there is no why. Like, that's the whole point. Like, I think when you're communicating this, when somebody is saying, oh, you're going to make my commute time longer, oh, you're trying to promote it. No, you have to push back immediately and hold firm to that and say that, no, this is about preserving life for everybody who lives here.
Well, let me have Sarah follow up on this, because a year after this Mar Vista project was laid out, they did a study to cover the effects of like how much of a delay there was, the improvement of safety. And can you share like some of the highlights of the report?
I don't want to misquote the report, but it was put out. It is a public document, and we can link to it later. I don't know the specifics of those. Of course, I'm focused on the economics. overall revenue of businesses on this great street have gone up. They did go down in the last 3 years, but it was before implementation of the project. So that may have been caused by some other economic factors, but it has gone up. And you can notice that there are businesses that have opened since, and they're doing fine. But I wanted to say one of the things that sometimes it's hard to get out back in front, or if you're on the defensive in the messaging. And so, one of the things that works is the subversive messaging. So, like the Art Walk is this fantastic event that people come out for, even if they are not bike lane fans, right? And so they're there, they are enjoying it. And it's like, there's a really warm feeling about projects like that, or our Small Business Saturday event that happens every year, where we're supporting, and you can also just go support businesses and public art that are in the streets, and it's kind of this, without jumping up and down and saying attack me for this, you're doing the things that make the street livable and safer, and when the city sometimes puts in the delayed walk signals, I know there's a term for it and I can't remember it, where pedestrians get to walk before the cars get to go. Thank you very much. Those make it really safe, and you barely notice it as a driver, and you don't even know that they've changed it, and it's just safer.
I want to fall through maybe just open discussion here, but what I see is like we do a lot of reactionary work here. Part of the problem is that we're not setting the message, and we're expending too much energy engaging in the trenches and hard-fought battles that will only gain inches, not miles.
Yeah, I think that that's a big question. I mean, I think we need a clear coalition of people who care about these issues in LA to come together and build in like a hearts and minds focused campaign that says exactly all of the ethos and empathy that Matt just explained. Because I feel like this is such, if you hear the facts and you meet some of these people who have lost loved ones, or if you've been hit by you ride and you've been hit, like, it's just, there's no way you can disagree. And so I really do think it's about stopping reacting for a second, because you can react forever, and that's what you'll do. That's what you'll spend your time doing, and that's sort of how Mar Vista felt. Or you can just take some time and know you're going to miss some things, and we used to say there's never like a crisis that should stop us from focusing on the long game, which is saving lives, and with the work that we do. So taking that time to work to coalesce all of these unique, awesome groups that are fighting the hard fights on the ground into something led and opted in with our public agencies that says we are here to save LA's people, and here's how. Here's why you need to pay attention, no matter how you're traveling. Go back to kindergarten. Here's how we share. I think there's a lot of ways that we can we have to change the culture of this city. And that's a hard thing, but I think we can do it.
I'm going to say I don't think we can do it, because I think we need to try a different approach, because I write stories that talk about how many people are killed last year, 265 or whatever, and people say, that's not that many. Here are some of the comments that I get. It's not that many, that's not that big of a problem. They always bring up guns, which actually more people are killed in gun violence. Fewer people are killed from gun violence in LA than are killed by cars. And that people won't come up with any sort of excuse to show why they shouldn't care, because they try to refute the child data that I always bring up too. And so I don't know if you can get people to care about what they perceive to be as an insignificant number, or if they haven't confronted it, or if they probably know somebody who's died in a car or because of a car, but that obviously, it's not changing some people's minds. And when I interviewed Mike Bonin on the podcast that I co-host, I asked him to talk about that, and he said, I can't get people to agree that it's a problem. And he's like, we have to get past that because some people will never agree that there is a problem. Climate change might be a problem that almost everybody agrees is a problem now. Traffic might be a problem that everybody agrees right now. I'm just not sure if like the death knell that continuing to bring up all these things is going to ever change some people's minds. So what I wonder is, do we need to just say these lanes need to change because we have these climate goals now? We have a Green New Deal for LA. Like we promised we were going to make 50% of trips by walking, biking, and transit by this date. Like, sorry, those are the rules. That's what we decided. There's no debate because I don't see anybody caring. They canceled a road diet in my neighborhood because like 2 people complained or something. I don't know. But that was on the mobility plan to become like a bike-centric street. So now what? It's canceled? We don't get our bike street?
You know, I think at least for the time being, it's just going to be messy, and that like I like the idea of like firmly getting into this strategic offensive position but like in the immediate future, what I see is just messy battles happening all over the place, and that like each little project and in each community and on each platform it's happening. And I do think that there can be a lot more synergy between groups that have the same goals that don't presently work together. This like, I think that a lot of times on social media it feels like pedestrian advocates and bike advocates are often just like not in sync, and that like with micro mobility issues like scooters, just see people that all want the same things, just not in lockstep of what they want to accomplish, and instead people are fighting over the crumbs left for them, and so I just feel like it's like a time where everything is in conflict, and that like have to be just prepared to battle, right? That it's like, and you need to sometimes battle with facts, and you need to sometimes battle with stories, and you sometimes just need to arm wrestle people that are bad actors, and that all those, and that you need like, some people, like this group represents a lot of the different kinds of shareholders that can impact that battle in different ways. Some more policy focused and some more communication focused.
Well, let me quickly follow up. Like I live in a suburban area in the San Fernando Valley. Most people around me drive cars. But my method of communicating with people is like, I know I'm not going to get people out of their cars all at once, When I talk to people in my community, I talk about the fact that making a more walkable, bikeable neighborhood empowers a neighborhood. It has less cut-through traffic. It makes your neighborhood quieter. It makes the air better. We want our kids to walk and bike to school. And we do see that it's possible. Is there a way of like engagement with the community that can kind of like lead with this, instead of always having to feel like we have to fight? That I feel like we're in a bell curve where we're kind of at one end, that we're out there, we're at the fights, and then the other end are the other people who keep LA moving. Then there's the big bell of people that maybe they bike, maybe they go to a CiclaValley, but they just don't have the engagement in terms of having the ideas to carry over. And CiclaValley has been great for Los Angeles in terms of getting people out a few days a year and see the city in a different light. But is there a way to build upon that in terms of messaging?
So when you're marketing, you always have to ask for the person you want to reach, what's in it for me, what's in for them, right? So you have to think about what is in it for them. And for,
a lot of people in Los Angeles, you're just go, go, go all the time. Oh my gosh, and the kids, and I gotta get to soccer, and what's for dinner tonight? You know, it's a busy, stressful life, right? So you have to figure out a way to get in there and get that message. And maybe for parents, it's about kids and safety. And maybe for retirees, it's about, we want these millennials to be able to afford to buy your house when you want to move, right? So we got to keep them happy. That is literally a thing. Don't laugh. But, you know, like whatever it is, so that you can get through the, well, I don't know, I guess it's nice to be able to ride a bike. I have to go to work. Yeah. Right? You have to get past, how do you get around that? You have to find a way to make that message clear.
One of the things that I think about also is that segregating it into bike livable streets community is inherently going to be oppositional, I guess, whereas versus doing a message like, okay, well, traffic violence does affect everybody. Even if some, for people drive, like most of the, I mean, my understanding is that most, like, I haven't checked the stats for this year, but I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, Alissa, of the motor vehicle deaths in the city of Los Angeles last year, the majority of, it was close to pedestrians and motor vehicles, but I think there were more people who were in cars who died too. And, yeah, and that's also a whole part of this, which that's touching every single person who is using our right-of-ways. And even if, okay, well maybe why you don't want that little traffic median in your street because it means you can't take a left turn there. Okay, but it also means that somebody can't get their vehicle up to 55 miles an hour on a residential street and ostensibly hit you while you're either in your car or doing whatever. Which that's what I think is really, really key with regards to improving just all of our re-engineering our infrastructure, is to emphasize to everybody that, okay, no, even if you don't think you have a stake in it, you do, because like the most dangerous thing you do every single day is get into your vehicle and turn on the ignition and then try and war with the streets of Southern California. That's basically it, but I think that's with regards to, because you don't want to, like, framing it as, okay, well, this is a bicycle issue, this is a walking issue, well, I'm not somebody who does that. Okay, well, no, but do you drive? Yeah, you do, and that's also, well, you're at risk too, because, like, I mean, one of the things that I don't remember exactly the context, but it was just with the trauma from somebody who's been in a motor vehicle crash. Is quite profound when it happens, and everybody remembers that. And it's by, like, when somebody lives for a longer time, it's probably happened to them at some point, and they can remember that. It's like, oh my God, yes, I remember this occurring to me. That was a horrible thing. And that, I think, I don't have an explicit way to, like a hard recommendation on that, but I think that is something that's been underutilized with regards to communicating why these things are so important. And it's not just about bikes or being able to, like, bike to the coffee shop for the millennials, versus, no, this is like everybody, this affects literally everybody who's using our public right-of-way. And I think that hasn't necessarily been seized upon as well as it has been, because it's just so, like, people forget about it, or they go out of their way to, like, repress the trauma of whatever the car crash was, or call it an accident, or the whole everything. And I think that's also just something that we should be underscoring whenever possible.
I'm going to steal this bit from Bill Maher, but we're going to skip to our other guest, Edin, who is also known as Chief Lunes. A year ago, April, his friend Frederick Frazier, who everyone knows as Woon, was killed in a hit and run on the streets of South LA. As many people know, we have a lot of hit and run deaths here in Los Angeles that pretty much go unsolved. So they kind of become commonplace in terms of news media. But then the following day, when you were riding around, there was another hit and run that was captured on camera, which brought this even to more prominence. And it really was like a what the fuck moment that we're watching this on camera happen, and we're not doing anything about it. So I want, as much as you can share, like, about this whole, the background and the whole situation of what this whole process has been dealing with it, because it's also helping to raise money for Frederick's family. So please share your story.
Yeah, so as he was saying, last year, my friend Frederick got killed on Manchester and Normandy. And the following day, his friends hosted a memorial ride. And they blocked off the intersection that day. And right after, like, I think an hour after, someone just lost their cool because they were blocking the whole intersection and plowed through the crowd. And one of our other friends, Trill, he got ran over. And that's what you see on, if some of you guys got to see that on KTLA and all the other news channels. And as far as I know, was the lady that ran over Trill, did they catch her? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, so from what I know, he never got like his medical expenses like covered, and she's not in jail. Same thing for Mariah, who killed Woon last year. She's still out free over a year now, and her mom keeps going into court, and nothing happens. You know, I feel like the judge and the jury and everyone who's in the criminal justice system sympathizes with drivers, because it's been over a year, like, and this lady's still free with a criminal record. She painted her car and ran to Moreno Valley with a criminal record, and still she's free walking, free going to parties. I feel for Woon's mom, you know, and so last year me and my friends, Woon's friends, we created Justice for Woon, and the whole point of it was to come to try to get the community behind it and to talk to our community leaders to see if we could get a protected bike lane on Manchester Boulevard, because it is one of the deadliest roads in LA, and all of South Central is also very deadly if you're on your bike or even if you're walking. It hasn't even been a year. This February, Joseph was killed also on Manchester and Gramercy, which is like 5 blocks away where Woon was killed last year. And I heard about 3-4 weeks ago, someone was crossing the street on Manchester and Figueroa, and he got ran over and killed. And the local politicians, like, we go up to them, we've talked to them already, and they just seem to just like brush us off. And we're telling them, like, hey, like, if you put a protected bike lane, you are going to save lives. It is going to help the community. And that day, they just told us, well, we can probably give you a bike lane that's not on Manchester, that's like close to Manchester. And what's the point? Like, if it's not on Manchester, it's not going to help anyone. And the battle to make lower income communities better, it's a tough battle, and it really does take a lot of time, which lately I haven't been dedicating like all my time to it. And I wish it would be a lot easier for us to get protected bike lanes and better crosswalks for pedestrians, because we are losing a lot of people every week, every month. You hear it, statistics are getting higher, people getting killed, ran over. Yeah, I'm fed up with it, because I'm always riding the streets of South LA every day. Like, I work in downtown LA doing deliveries, and I have to ride back home usually at 9 or 10 o'clock, and I have to put up with drivers who come way too close to me or are very aggressive. And I try to keep my cool, because sometimes, you know, like, I have a U-lock with me, and I'm like, okay, I could bust the window, but I'll keep my cool, because I know if I go there, I'm probably gonna get shot or I'm gonna get mowed down. So God help me, let me keep my cool, and hopefully we get some justice for all the people who've been killed by cars, and make the community better.
One of the things also with Manchester and so many of these other streets is that in the City of LA Mobility Plan 2035, Manchester is one of the streets in that plan, in the city document approved in 2011 or 2012, that says that it asks specifically for an engineering, its engineering rec is for a protected bike lane on that corridor. And that is a city plan that in theory we're going to do at some point, but despite this, even with a considerable amount of public pressure to do something, nothing occurred. I cannot speak to exactly why nothing has occurred. I know there was a lot of attention on it. Local media, even the New York Times picked up a story on it. But ultimately, it still is a very deadly place for life, for people walking or on bikes or whatever, and in cars, do the whole thing. And ultimately that comes down to it's an audience of one. So as much as there is convincing the wider public of the merit of this, I don't think in this situation, I don't think anybody disagreed. I don't think there was anybody saying, well, we can't, why, everybody was like, well, this is outrageous, why can't we do something about this? And then it comes down to just the political framework of how Los Angeles, as well as every other jurisdiction in the state of California, works, that ultimately it is going to be the local city council that has the say-so on this. This is a city-controlled street. It's not a Caltrans corridor. Like, I know there are some Caltrans corridors too, but in the case of this, it's a matter of, okay, well, how do you get the elected official to actually stick out their neck and say something on that? Which Mike Bonin has done so in the case of Mar Vista, but also I don't necessarily know it was always a given in that situation. But I mean, for Moon and everybody else who has died or been seriously injured on Manchester, it's really, okay, what now? Which I think is where a lot of people feel. You lose somebody you know and love and trust and everything, and then you try very hard for as long as you can, but then nothing changes. And that's exhausting, I would imagine.
The thing is, we have a plan, the mobility plan. I keep bringing it up. Everybody's brought it up. Most cities, these things happen and everybody gets outraged and they demand change. We have a plan. You can go to any map. Anytime something happens, you could pull up this map and say, oh, guess what? We were supposed to have this done by now. This was supposed to be in here by now. And I think that's the one thing that I keep coming back to when people ask me what they can do. I'm like, just pull up the map for your neighborhood and go to whoever, just be like, why isn't this done? We actually have this plan. But to your point of what happens now, it was passed so long ago that people don't remember the outreach happening. Like, they don't remember any of the meetings. A bunch more people have moved in who think they own the neighborhoods and the streets now, and think that nothing should change. So we've now wasted all this time with a great plan that people don't believe is real or should be implemented now.
I would say also we are incredibly distracted by homelessness at the moment in the Mar Vista Community Council. I don't believe they've discussed Venice Boulevard for a month. Pass the microphone. Sorry.
So homelessness, is dominating the conversation everywhere, and so a lot of times, it's not even being discussed at the community level. Nobody's talking about bike lanes right now in Mar Vista at all.
Let's ask Dina a little follow-up on this. Like, when we're covering stories like this, how do we add depth to this? How do we add depth to equity issues when we're covering these?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to let the people on the ground lead. You have to let people tell their own stories. But more importantly, you need to give them the money to do that. They can't be doing this because they're a good person and because they have extra time. Like, people have jobs and it needs to be funded. Often we expect communities to sort of come to the table and work with us, but for free. And that's not going to work. I mean, bear with me through this analogy, but like, I feel like equity is also often seen in the CBO and funder world as sort of this sprinkle on top of the mobility cupcake. Like, we got to add it in there because, you got to say equity, but it's not that at all. It's like the flour, it's the baking soda, it's a key ingredient that needs to be baked in and part of it from the beginning, and it needs to be funded. But yeah, I think in terms of adding depth, it needs to be getting folks like Edin to advancing the capacity of advocacy organizations to do more trainings and communications trainings, organizing trainings, all sorts of things that these communities can come to and get paid to come to, and then learn to be leaders and elevated in their community, so that they're the ones telling the story, they're the ones making the change. That all is really hard if the people in power don't do anything, though. That's a harder nut to crack, but I think, you know, just remembering none of us are safe until all of us are safe, and giving the people who are most disinvested in where the highest deaths and injuries are occurring, focusing there first.
Peter, you covered this story a year afterwards in Bicycling Magazine. And we've been starting to see on the national scene, you know, more stories like this. Justin Williams, John Jones here. How have they been received in that global context? Can we have an appetite to tell more stories rather than just the top level stuff about cycling? You know, the personal issues of like how cycling and active transportation, you know, affect a lot of people's lives.
Well, I think storytelling is a really powerful weapon where you can humanize these issues and these personal tragedies, and then when people read about Woon and how he fought to this place in life that he was at and what was taken from him and his family, then people feel more of a connection to the issue. And my perspective as someone who writes for big national magazine brands like Bicycling and Outside, that those brands are much more interested in this issue than they were a couple of years ago. I wrote a story this past summer about this bike messenger in New York named Robin Heitman, who was killed on 6th Avenue, and I think that story wound up being in terms of just traffic, their number one story this year, and that, like, when you humanize it, people connect to it, and it's like important for people here to realize that all the challenges that we're facing in communities in LA are just playing out everywhere. Like, all the big cities have the equivalent of a big mobility plan that's collecting dust in some regard. That, like, New York City is already now has more cyclists killed than any year since 1999. We're going to probably have 1,000 cyclists killed in the U.S. for the first time since the 70s. You know, it's like people are on phones, more people are driving SUVs, the number of miles driven just goes up year after year, more people are riding. It's like the people that we're up against, it's like the whole system is broken and no one's going to invent a time machine to go back to the 1950s, and we just need to solve these problems, and it's going to be a battle, right? But it's like telling stories, that way you were describing the bell curve, all these people who are just not waking up thinking they want to get informed about mobility issues. It's like realizing that there are interesting people whose lives were changed or cut short because they want to get to work 2 minutes earlier, might shift how they think about these issues. And so it's like sometimes just like communicating and humanizing these stories can make a surprisingly huge impact.
I want to follow through this climate psychologist and economist Preston Stoknes talks about the psychological effect of having to deal with climate change, and I think a lot of the same issues they face, the same thing in terms of what we face in the cycling mobility community, that people all agree it's a problem, but being able to solve these problems when we're asking other people, it's outside their circle of influence. Cognitive dissonance sets in. He was pointing to a study where 4,000 homes were asked to save energy. It was divided into 4 groups of 1,000. The first group, he told, do it because it's sustainable. The second group, he said, do it because of your kid's future. The third group, he said, do it because you'll save money. The fourth group, he showed how much they were saving next to the neighbors.
Ooh.
That was the group that had the biggest impact on saving energy. And what he's bringing up is that basically telling stories about other people relating their issues to ours is what helps bring people in to thinking about change. You know, the more that they know that other people are doing it, people like them, the more likely we are able to think of ourselves in that light. And I want to continue the discussion. Who wants to comment on how important is storytelling, and are we doing what we need to do in terms of reaching out? When I was talking about that bell curve, you know, getting that middle area of people we need to talk to.
Something really good. You guys all see that
Alissa and Ariadne's story in the New York Times called Cars Are Death Machines. Really good, just, you know, facts and data, but also those stories. And if you read it online, you would read a quote and then the person's face would like slide into frame, and it was just like an amazing experience. And maybe that's the type of storytelling. You know, I say we've given up. I can't talk about death anymore because it doesn't get through to people. But maybe these are the kind of stories we need to tell in our cities, or get people out there with photographers. Like, we have these little rainbow halo things in LA now, which are a really great idea. And we have bicycle signs too. We have like signs that are supposed to go up in these areas to talk about where cyclists were killed. But you can't even really see them unless you're on foot or on a bike, which is like the most devastating part. I saw one and I like, if you're in a car, you'd never notice it. You'd never see. So how do we mark these in either the physical areas or in our minds to remind people that every time you step foot out of your house, no matter how you're getting there, you are at a very high risk of losing your life? I don't know.
That was just one of my favorite signs that I saw. It was a guerrilla installation in the Elysian Valley area. It just said, drive like your brother died here, drive like your son died here, which in terms of messaging, I was like, oh, I've never seen this before, and that's much better than, like, it communicates everything very, very clearly, because it can underscore that you or a loved one, like, you know, you turn left here every single day to get on the freeway, right? Like, so does a whole bunch of other people, so do all their loved ones. And that, I don't know the origin of that specific sign. I know that the case, it was a teenager, it's a freeway exit that turns left into, there's a crosswalk there. I think it was a 14-year-old who was crossing the street. Somebody blasted through the freeway exit, and it struck and killed him. But I know there was a little engineering change to change the little syncing of that signal, so that way you wouldn't have somebody turning left across that intersection while somebody was in the crosswalk, but at the same time, like, that's, okay, cool. But also I like the signs at the intersection, drive like your brother died here, something like that, which I thought was, at every intersection, because it really is, like, drive like your kids live here, like those signs, but also I think that seems to clue people in when they're in the driver's seat.
Just in terms of your question about storytelling, I think my experience, like if you're in a community meeting or on social media and you're talking about a road diet and people are like arguing about whether induced demand is real or not, and talking about vehicles per hour, and it's like there's so many things you can arm wrestle about, but when you take a story like what happened to Woon, there's just no arguing that he had this beautiful life and the street wasn't engineered properly, and someone who wasn't paying attention sort of exemplified a problem in our culture, and that law enforcement and the judicial system have failed us, that when you tell the stories, you wind up with this narrative that everyone can relate to, and there's just no arguing that something is broken that needs fixing. and that sometimes, as much as we all want to like ply in data, that the narratives of human lives make it clear to everyone what's at stake and what needs to be done. And so I don't think you can underestimate the power of telling stories.
Yeah, I feel like I've made a lot of documentaries for nonprofits in my 12 years of experience, and we had one really interesting time where we made a documentary in 2010 about a woman who was shackled giving birth on the border. And we made this documentary, and we put it out to a new community, not the immigration rights community, but the women's rights community. And they were mad. They were like, why are you showing this to us? This has no relevance. We don't care about this. We were surprised. So we went back. We wrote a narrative about another story we had heard from the same woman. This was based on a woman, a trip we took to Arizona on a solidarity tour. And, you know, this was a story of a woman whose daughter was assaulted. They were all undocumented, so the daughter came home, told the mom, and, you know, she went to call the police, and the mom was like, the daughter was like, you can't call the police. I won't let you. And then it ended with, you know, what call would you make? And we shared that same narrative story, actors, and script, everything, production company, to the same group. People were like, I'm sobbing at my desk, how can I get involved, what can I do? Same exact issue, story told in a different way. I really think it's about getting at people's hearts. Like numbers, statistics, people don't care and they don't listen. And they're used to like liberals yelling those things at them. They're used to the Al Gore documentary. I think we got to come at them with something a little bit more creative and to get through the empathy.
I just want to put in a word for kind of the storytelling aspect of, you know, when you do see the families riding in the bike lane together on the way to school and the people doing it to go to work, you know, and the kind of, you know, making sure, and they don't have to be stories, but just the imagery helps, you know, just so it counters, you know, on that subliminal level. But the other thing that I would say, and I am a mother of teenagers, so this is what I'm seeing, but, you know, they aren't putting up with this crap anymore. They're cutting school and protesting and doing the things that they think matter because they think we're not fixing these problems. And we aren't, obviously, right? So I wonder if it's about engaging the 14-year-olds, you know, and sort of getting in the curriculum more and being and with ways that are appropriate for what they can do.
Burning their driver's license.
Well, most of them don't have it because, by the way, it's really expensive to insure a teenage boy driver. But anyway, that's another story. Anyway,
We're at 11 o'clock. The quick question?
That was a question, and I would say I think you should have left a little more time for questions from the audience. I'm with Families for Safe Streets, which no one has mentioned. My daughter was killed in Cleveland 10 years ago. And I appreciate that there has been discussion about storytelling. Families for Safe Streets is integrating people into the fights, not just taking their stories and telling it. And I've been part of the CBC bike, cow bike for a number of years, and I've been sort of frustrated that somehow we're marginalized. I coordinate organizers for the Right of Silence in California, and that's not really talked about here either. And there are lots of organizing things that involve the people who are the families of the victims that need to be integrated into the work here. It isn't just telling the story, sort of, oh, thank you very much, you've done your piece, go away. Like I go to city council meetings, that kind of thing. You're part of the process. I just came back from Vision Zero in New York, where Families for Safe Streets was built into the entire conference.
Yeah, there is, when I started this, I said, we have a lot of space that we need to discover, ask questions, think about how we're talking to other people, because we talk to ourselves a lot. You know, we speak the same language. We are measured by similar metrics. People on the outside, they don't speak the same language when we're trying to sell this type of infrastructure. If any of you ever a chance to see Simon Sinek's talk about the why, it's very pertinent to how you reach people. You know, he says Martin Luther King's the famous speech was, "I have a dream, not I have a plan." The last thing I kind of want to talk about is think about the audience who you're talking to, because, like, you know, for myself, you know, I'm car light. I drive to take my daughter or to get my bike fixed. But the rest of the time, I'm in a car taking transit, you know. But for me to speak to other people around me, to put that life on them, that's a far distance from where they are. You know, for me, like, my little stump speech is the Trader Joe mechanism. It doesn't matter which Trader Joe's you go into, the parking lot is packed. If there's one more car in that parking lot, no one's going to move. And you just say, hey, wouldn't it make sense to go ahead and try biking to the Trader Joe's? You know, you've planted in people's minds that, hey, that's something simple, practical I can do. Because nobody is going to all of a sudden switch from driving cars to demanding having bike lanes in their area for safer streets. So I just want to end today, like, think about the audience who you're speaking with, what it is that may resonate with them, because the world we're living in is not always the world of the people who were our constituents. Anyways, I'd like to thank my esteemed panel here today for this talk. And like I said, my name's Zachary, CiclaValley, Sir Auerswald, Dean of Variano, Peter Flax, Alissa Walker, Matt Tinoco, and Barrientos. Thank you so much for being here.
It sounded like Saturday Night Live.
Are these going to
I was like, where's the music?
Halloween's coming.
Oh.